From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the JR at the end of the name. It's very important to remember the Junior. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content, and don't be afraid to leave a comment or two down in the comment section. Today, it is Friday in the city of New Orleans, wherever you are watching or listening. Hope you are enjoying this Friday. Happy birthday to the New Orleans Saints on this November 1st.
Hey.
They turn 58 years old today, I believe. Is that correct? 58 years of age today. So the first professional franchise in the city of New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints, turned 58. So happy birthday to them. If you're watching us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, thank you for finding us here. That network is off and running, no doubt about that. So we are glad you are here with us to check out the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. All right, Andre, how you feeling on this Friday?
I'm feeling good.
All
You know, it got the rain out the way early. You know, on Friday I go shoot high school football.
Yeah.
So the worst thing about high school football is when you got to go out there in the rain jacket. And I know if I'm uncomfortable, the kids are uncomfortable. So let's get the rain out the way early and we can have a nice, warm, healthy Friday full of some good football.
All right, hopefully that's going to be pretty good. We'll be able to check that out later today. So hopefully that turns out to be good for all involved. All right, today it is Friday, as we mentioned, the last day before the Saints leave for Carolina to take on the lowly Carolina Panthers, but it's not exactly like the Saints are that high. It's just they're a little bit higher than the Carolina Panthers. Big picture here. This is the 9th game of the season, so they got 8 before, and they will have 8 after. There's no middle, obviously, when it comes to 17. It's an odd number, folks. We understand that. So this is as close as we're going to get to a mid-season checkpoint. And today, big picture-wise, we're just going to look at how do we think they can do down the stretch in this very pivotal 9-game window that they have as we get into November and into December and into January. And can they truly do enough to make some kind of run to do what they want to do, which is get into the postseason. That's where they're at, guys. I mean, they haven't necessarily given up on that hope, as crazy as that might sound to some of y'all. I get it. They are paid professionals. They're going to want to do what they can do to extend their season as long as possible. So that's where we want to go with the big picture.
Yeah, before the season, you and I sat here and we predicted the Saints record throughout 17 games. And so far, it's kind of played out a little closer to what I expected. What do you remember what you said the record would be at first? I think I was 6-11.
Yeah, yes, I absolutely do. I said they were going to be 8-9.
8-9. Both of those records still attainable as we look forward this season. Just going through the rest of the games, they're going to be at Carolina, at home versus the Falcons, at home versus the Browns. Then they've got their bye week. They're at home again against the Los Angeles Rams. They go to New York to take on the Giants. They come back home to take on the Washington Commanders. Then they go to Green Bay December 23rd in the middle of the winter. They come back home to battle the Las Vegas Raiders, former team of quarterback Derek Carr. And then to close the season out, they're going to Tampa Bay. Sean, how do you think the Saints finish through those 9 games, and what's their final record?
Yeah, so this is a good time to point this out because, as we mentioned, there really is no halfway point. There's a halfway point. There's 8 before, 8 after, 1 in the middle here, 9th game of the season. We think the Saints are going to win Sunday. So we think coming back Monday, the Saints are going to be 3-6. So you can count that as one of the victories. But as much as I believe and have stated multiple times on this podcast this week that Derek Carr will provide stability to the Saints and maybe instill a little confidence and just some competency to not just the offense but the entire operation, because it's such an important piece of the operation. And frankly, with him out, there was quite a dip in the production at that position, and there were other factors that played in. But like I said, not having that at that position, you could just tell the confidence waned everywhere else, and to the point where they just at no point other than maybe the first half of the Tampa game did it feel like they believed they could win any game. That's just the facts of the matter. But we also had to be realistic about who Derek Carr is, what he's done just in a short time here. I mean, we can go back and look at with the Raiders, and I think that's certainly valid. But just for the purposes of this window of time he's been with the Saints, he's got 9-8 record his first season, and then he's been 2-3 this season. So is that 11-11? I believe that's right in the middle, 11-11. So he's been a 500 quarterback in the games he has started. So he's not perfect. He is an imperfect quarterback. He has flaws, and he has played bad in games they could have and probably should have won. But having him there gives you the best possible chance to make any sort of spark for the rest of the season. We've already discussed this. So back to the topic at hand is the big picture and just kind of resetting the record for where we think the Saints are going to go this season. I think if Derek Carr maintains his track record and it hovers, Derek Carr led teams with the Saints, and it hovers around 500, and there's 9 games left. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give him the +1 because he had the +1 last year. He went 9-8 last year, not 8-9. So if there's 9 games left, and I'm giving him the +1, I'm going to say 5-4 down the stretch. The victories that I have: Carolina. This is going to be a crazy one, but I think it can be done. Atlanta.
Okay.
Cleveland. The Giants. And the Raiders. Losses, I have the Rams, which I think is a toss-up. I think they can beat the Rams, depending on where they're at from an injury standpoint. The Packers at just prime time. They just haven't done well at prime time, and it's going to be cold and everything. So Packers. Washington, because I just think Jaden Daniels is playing another level right now. And then the season finale at Tampa Bay, which, look, NFC South games are toss-ups, but they're toss-ups in both directions. That's why I gave them 1 for 1, outside of, obviously, the Carolina. So if you add that up, 5-4 combined with the 2-6. I have them finishing 7-10. And my original prediction was 8-9. So that would be a game off of my original prediction because I didn't think they'd be in this big of a hole at the 8-game mark. But then again, I didn't think they'd be without Derek Carr for that 3-game stretch where they really did not look well. So that's why I have it. 7-10. 7-10 is going to put you right back in that boat. It's going to put you right back in that, okay, can they talk themselves into believing that they had just enough adversity to warrant the operation being on good footing, which I think would be a big mistake. But I could see them talking themselves into that because everybody coming back would be a year older in that scenario. So it's not like they would be better next season or guaranteed to be better next season, even with a better or a cleaner bill of health. So that's where I'm at with it, 7-10. I can, if they somehow hit that their stride like they did the first 2 games of the season, I could maybe talk myself into 6-3 and finishing that 8-9 record. But I think I'm pretty comfortable at 7-10. And at 7-10, if it were up to me, there would be significant changes.
I agree, and I'm a little less. I'm at 6-11. I was at 6-11 before the season. I'm still at 6-11. If I remember correctly, everything I thought was going to happen did happen. Minus, I thought they would lose to the Cowboys. I thought they would beat the Broncos.
Okay.
So 1-1 there. Looking down the schedule, I think they beat Carolina this week. Anybody could beat Carolina. I think they beat Cleveland, assuming Jameis Winston is the starter when the Browns come here. Jameis Winston's homecoming will be spoiled by the Saints. I think they go to New York, and I think they beat the Giants. And I think they can handle the Derek Carr revenge game, the Las Vegas Raiders, when they come here late in the season. And now we get to the losses. And we've talked at length. It's been a long time since the Saints have beaten a team that they weren't supposed to beat. Maybe you could argue that was the Cowboys in week 2, but the Cowboys wound up not being as good as a lot of people anticipated. So as I look down the schedule, the Atlanta Falcons at home, I know that's a rivalry game. It's always a toss-up. It can go either way. The Saints played them pretty well in week 4, but that game's going to mean a lot for Atlanta. The Saints are fighting for jobs and careers, but Atlanta's fighting for a playoff spot. I think they lose to Atlanta. The Rams at full health, especially that offense, they're still a problem. Kyron Williams has been great. When Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are both out there catching passes from Matthew Stafford, that's a hard team to stop. The Saints secondary influx throughout the season. I'm taking the Rams in that game. Washington, we've seen the Saints struggle to stop mobile quarterbacks. We've seen the Saints struggle to finish at the quarterback, as Dennis Allen always says, when it comes to getting the quarterback down when you do get to him. And Jaden Daniels is one of the best 2 or 3 in the league when it comes to making plays with his feet. I think Jaden Daniels coming home in a way to the Louisiana, to the Superdome. He played right down the road at LSU. I think Jaden Daniels leaves Louisiana with a win. Green Bay, a tough team that not only will be fighting for the division, will be fighting for a wild card spot because the NFC North is stacked right now with the Packers, the Lions, and the Vikings. Going to Green Bay, the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field around Christmas time, primetime game. Yeah, I'm going to take Green Bay there. And then to close out the season, give me Tampa Bay, who assumably will have Mike Evans back at wide receiver by then. He's injured right now. I believe he'll be back by week 17, and Tampa will probably also be fighting for a wild card spot to where if this season goes as you and I predict, the Saints won't be fighting for anything in week 17. You might even see backups.
Yeah.
So give me those losses, which puts the Saints at 6-11, and I agree with you. At 6-11, you got to make some major changes in that front office and the coaching staff. From the players' perspective, there's a lot of things that need to change if this season starts the way it did and ends at 6-11.
Yeah. So you had them going 4-5 down the stretch.
Yeah.
With the only difference between you and I is Atlanta.
Yeah, I think they'll lose Atlanta.
I think they beat Atlanta. I really do. Especially if they get I think they're going to get the win Sunday, but especially if they come back 3-6 the first time, and the way they lost, I think they can beat Atlanta. Best case scenario, what do you have them at?
Best case scenario, they would beat Atlanta, which would give them a 3-game winning streak going into the bye. I think they could, again, best case scenario, they can come out of that bye and give the Rams a run for their money and maybe upset the Rams in that game. And that's about as far as I could see them going, because I still don't think they beat Washington and Green Bay. Tampa Bay is maybe a toss-up. So best case scenario, I think they're 8-9, maybe 9-8 if they can squeeze out a win against Tampa to close the season. But I don't think either of those records get you into the playoffs.
Yeah, see, and I think the absolute maximum, if every break imaginable goes their way, they can get to 7-2 down the stretch. And maybe they get to 9-8. Now, if they got to 9-8, I think they run it back.
I think so.
I think
too.
everything gets run back.
Especially because you've got the injury excuse.
At that point, you would have the excuse. And at that point, they would have gone on a significant run. But typical, just good enough to talk yourself into it, but never good enough to just break through.
And I have a feeling that's what a lot of fans watching the Saints and watching this podcast, I have a feeling that's not what they want to see.
They do not want to do it. By the way, leave your predictions down below in the comment section. Because Dennis Allen has beaten the Rams before with Stafford. I think Andy Dalton was the quarterback. And then they won in Tampa last year. That might have been their best win of the season last year, right? Well, one of them. Because it was, remember they finished 4 out of 5.
Atlanta at the end of the season.
In Atlanta, they dominated, but they had a lame duck coach at that point that was on his way out. So, but I think the more realistic thing is 5-4, and that's on the positive side of the average that I think that you normally get with Derek Carr. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they, because as much as I think they could maybe, an NFC South game they could win, like the Tampa game, they could also just mess around and lose to the Giants. You know what I'm saying? Just something like that where they're just funky and they don't play well. So I'm gonna stick with 7-10 because I think that's reasonable, and I just think that's, if you study the schedule and study the track record, and if you just study the trends, I think that's a reasonable spot for the Saints. And at 7-10. See, I even think 8-9 might get everybody back. 7-10, I think, might be the line. That was the line I said last year before the season. I said double-digit losses or worse. You got to move on, even with the situation with injuries and everything. So that's where I'm at. Well, speaking of injuries, the injury report came out today. You want to read it off? It's a pretty significant injury list.
We've got 4 players out Sunday against the Carolina Panthers, starting with cornerback Marshawn Lattimore out with a hamstring injury. You've got another cornerback, wide receiver, Bub Means, out. Running back, Kendre Miller, who just made his comeback, he's out. And another cornerback in Kool-Aid McKinstry out. And that one's interesting. We'll get to that in a second. Because Kool-Aid practiced in a limited capacity on Wednesday, then didn't practice on Thursday, didn't practice today, Friday, and he was ruled out today. You've got running back Jamal Williams out, or doubtful, So no Kendre Miller, unlikely to have Jamal Williams. And from a questionable perspective, you've got Rico Payton, another corner, Cedric Wilson Jr., another receiver, Nick Saldivari on the offensive line, and you've got Shane Lemieux, Nephi Sewell, and John Ridgeway. So your cornerbacks are kind of looking a little shallow because Marshawn's out, Kool-Aid's out, and Rico Payton hasn't practiced all week.
Okay, injuries are injuries, and guys that start the week and finish the week where you know don't practice or whatever, or they basically maintain the same status. That's one thing, but I'm starting to get really concerned about these guys like Kool-Aid. He was limited Wednesday and then didn't practice the rest of the week. Did he get banged up in practice? Like, is this really happening? Like, is there because that's not the first time that's happened, and I don't want to give specifics because I can't recall every single one right now, but there's been a couple times where it looked like guys got, but if just based off their practice participation, they felt worse after a day of practice. Which, what are we doing here, guys? What the heck's going like John Ridgeway? He's a rotational defensive tackle. Full go Wednesday, did not practice Thursday, back to limited Friday. Now he's questionable. What's going on here? This is oblique. Like I don't get it, and I think that's something to watch. Because if that is the case, and there's an alarming number of guys that are getting injured in practice, add that to the list of other issues that they've got to really take a hard look at. Is it with what they're doing and just the timing of practice, whatever the case may be, something's got to be done about that. Now on the flip side, a couple guys get better throughout the week. Cedric Wilson, Tyrann Mathieu, you knew it was going to get better. It was just an illness, and then anyone else get better. Jawan Johnson went from limited to, so that's certainly good. Look, I don't have the analytics on that, and I don't know if that's something that's even popped up to them, but it's just something that I've noticed that guys that seem to be feeling worse as the practice week goes on. When you would think if you're gonna feel worse earlier in the week and then you get better as the week goes on, because if you get banged up in the game, obviously just the more time you have to recover, the better. But I don't know. I think that's something to certainly monitor going forward. And back to the question, hey, you don't have Kool-Aid, you don't have Marshawn Lattimore. Rico Payton, who is a special teams guy, is questionable but hadn't practiced all week with a back. So if he can't go,
don't have a Debo either.
You don't have a Debo. You got Alontae Taylor, Ugo Amadi, Shamar John Charles. All in the practice squad. You call him up.
Pull JT Gray and try to make him a nickel corner.
I mean, who's the nickel? I don't know. I mean, because Amadi is a nickel corner. So who plays outside? Is it Shamar Jean Charles and then Amadi? Who else do you even have on the practice squad right now that could be called up? I know Shamar Jean Charles is a practice squad guy that could get called up. Was there another transaction? I don't know, but that's not thank God for the Panthers, because that's not that is not ideal going into any NFL game.
Yeah, I don't think the Panthers have three good receivers, so
right.
It might work out well against them.
Anyway, what are your thoughts on the injury report?
It's definitely concerning. That cornerback looks like their counterparts at receiver at one point. A few games ago we were talking about no Olave, no Shaheed, Spencer Rattler going to war with Bub Means and everybody. Now corner's the same way. You're down your number one guy in Lattimore. You're down your number two guy in Odebo. Now Alontae Taylor, who has played nickel because the team needed him at nickel. Now you're asking him to play outside most likely and guard the team's best receiver in Carolina, which will probably be the rookie Xavier Legette. They've got another rookie in Jalen Coker who's been playing pretty well. And now Ugo Amadi, who has been doing a lot of special team stuff. You have him there, and you're going to have to figure out JT Gray, Shamar Jean Charles. It's definitely not a good situation. But if you were playing any other team on that schedule that we named, this would be a big problem. If it was Atlanta coming to town, if you had to guard Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp like this, you might see 40 points. But Bryce Young's throwing the ball, so it doesn't matter who's covering.
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, Trey Herndon is the other one. Yes. They signed him, looks like Tuesday. They signed him to the practice squad, so he might be one of those elevations. Remember, without Kendre Miller, the organization just got to be so done. That's just so frustrating. I mean, get always unhealthy, but when you get healthy, you're right back to getting injured again. And that's just a major. It's got to be like, really? Because he's good. The guy is good. You notice him when he's on the field. So that's tough. But good thing they have the Carolina Panthers this week. But good health is not promised to anyone. But just sorely feels like the soft tissue injuries are just getting worse and worse when it comes to the Saints, when it comes to hamstring. And then Jamal Williams, a guy who's been pretty much an Iron Man, he's doubtful with a groin injury. So who are your backs? You got Kamara,
Taysom Hill. It's probably going to have to take a lot of those.
They signed Cabote to the practice squad. Jordan Mims. Are those two guys getting called up? Oh man, there are so many things that you got to manage when you talk about the week to week life that is the NFL football season. But in saying all that, I still like the Saints to win Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. Do we have any questions? I know we got some questions throughout the week, so we couldn't really get to all of them, but we got a little time here. And I've got about 6 minutes left here, so why don't we get to some questions here just to get some interaction with some of the fan base.
This one, an interesting one from Darvell from Slidell. Mm-hmm. Is there a move that the Saints can make before the trade deadline that can potentially get them into the playoffs?
I have said they need another playmaker on offense. That when you add it all up, because they're down one with Shaheed. And I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who I talked to one-on-one Sunday, so check that out for Sunday, I think he's the guy that they like. But can you add another playmaker in some kind of way? Is there a tight end that can? I don't see it. I mean, I don't think there's a deal out there that's attainable. I mean, you can throw any name out there and say, yeah, offer this, offer that. I don't know if there's necessarily a deal that's attainable, a realistic option. I mean, I thought the most realistic one was Devontae Adams, or the name never surfaced with Amari Cooper, but another playmaker. So I don't know if Marquez Valdez-Scantling is the guy that kind of fills that void, but I think that's how they're going to have to roll. So I don't think that's reasonable for them to attain.
Yeah, I think that there were names because a lot of playmakers and receivers have been traded this year. I mean, just in the last few weeks, Amari Cooper was traded, Devontae Adams was traded, DeAndre Hopkins was traded, who really wasn't getting any run in Tennessee. Now he's with Mahomes in Kansas City. Deontay Johnson was traded. I know that's always tricky because it's in the division, and you don't know if the Panthers would want to trade the Saints, especially right before they play the Saints. But even early in the season, we talked about Mark Andrews when he seemingly fell out of favor with the Baltimore Ravens, and they were going more Isaiah Likely. Any of those guys trading for them, especially when you had so many injuries over the last few weeks, I think that could have helped them. But now looking forward, I don't know if there's a big move they can make. I know Mike Williams, the former Charger, now New York Jet, has kind of fallen down that depth chart because of the arrival of Devontae Adams. You could probably get him for the low. I think he was a first-round draft pick once upon a time. Yeah. But, I mean, all the big names that you would think would be traded are kind of out of it. But
I actually think it's more the reverse. I actually think the Saints are going to have to say no to some people for their own guys.
Yeah.
Like, I could totally see somebody pick up the phone and calling for Chase Young. I really could. I could totally see somebody picking up the phone and calling for, well, maybe Chase Young might be it, because I don't know who else would jump off the screen in terms of tradable assets.
Maybe an Olave, maybe
I think Olave is one of those guys they see as a future.
Davis.
Maybe, but I don't think they would do that with DeMario. Yeah. Chase Young just got here. Hasn't necessarily performed. He's close. He's the ultimate, like, almost kind of player. But I think that's more of that option is, hey, teams saying, the Saints aren't going anywhere. Let me pick up the phone and see if we can pluck a guy or two off their roster that can help us down the back stretch. So anyway, good question. What's next?
This one, less of a question, more of a statement from Jimbo in Metairie. We need to draft a quarterback. I think this team is a quarterback away from being right back in the national conversation. Do you think this team is a quarterback away?
No, I think, no, I don't, because I think they need way more than just a quarterback, but a quarterback would be a good start. And I will say this, the way the books are for next year, guys, I'll be the first one to say it, and it's probably going to upset you. I think they're restructuring Derek Carr's contract, and I think he's going to be back next year. That does not mean, and I actually prefer this method, you couldn't draft the future at that position with Derek Carr still under contract, because I think you can get out of it in the fourth year much easier than the third year. But given their cap situation, given what you would gain by restructuring, I think they're going to I don't think they're going to be forced to, just based off the cap situation. But in saying that, you read through the list. I mean, they need a tight end. They need another receiver. You can make a case they need another lineman, another D lineman. I mean, a linebacker, secondary, whatever. They have so many, a running back, so many holes that an elite quarterback, I think, is a great start. And I think it would bring some success and it would turn the momentum around. But I don't think it's the end all be all right now.
Especially, a lot of people have different opinions when it comes to building a team. Some people think you get that game changer quarterback first and you build around them. Other people believe it's best to build the foundation first and then bring the quarterback in. And I think that's more of the situation the Saints will most likely find themselves in. Because if you draft, let's say, thinking about where we think the Saints may be in the draft based off their record.
That's it.
Ewers, Beck, Milroe, Nussmeier, probably the 4 quarterbacks that'll still be around. I don't think Cam Ward and Shador Sanders will be there.
Yeah.
You draft one of those guys, they can sit behind Derek Carr. But even if they stepped in, I don't think you're not going 13-4.
Well, that's just it. You're not, and the thing is, you think got him going 6-11. I got him going 7-10. That's probably gonna be like what 11 or 12 drafted in maybe a little higher with 6-11. I don't know. And I just. And that's the only path they haven't taken. Because I don't know about you guys, but like if they decided to go another direction at quarterback, I'm done with the veteran free agent. I am first round pick quarterback. That is the direction it's the only thing they haven't done since Archie Manning.
I've never seen it in my lifetime, and I turn 30 next year.
Me neither.
I've never seen a young quarterback.
That's to me, and at the 11th overall selection, could you get somebody? Maybe, but I don't know if you would get someone that would qualify for that level. At least it's always a risk, but I don't know if you'd get it quite enough predicting or selecting at that spot in the low teens or mid teens, wherever they finish up. Because I think they're going to stabilize this season. I think they're going to be somewhat respectable by the end of the year in terms of it's not going to be a total utter disaster, which is maybe what some of y'all want.
Yeah, I think you hold off on drafting a quarterback, build the lineup a little bit, maybe get the running game back going in finding Alvin Kamara's heir, so to speak. Build a few other positions up on offense, and maybe 2-3 years down the road, you draft your franchise quarterback.
That was a great question, but I promise you, we're going to have more pods on that. And my opinion could change based off draft stuff, but I'm just not there yet. So anyway, we got to get out of here. So for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.